Now, one of the things that we have to come to grips with is that if we're going to follow in the footsteps of the early apostle, the apostolic writers, we must rid our mind of any kind of thought of perfection in this life. These apostolic writers that we read and want to believe had no illusions of perfection. In fact, let's go to the next slide here and take a look at some of these verses. When you read what these writers say, it becomes really clear that they had no illusions of perfectness in their life. Paul writes and he says, "For there is no distinction, for all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God." That's the standard. John says, "If we say we have no sin, we are deceiving ourselves and the truth is not in us." One day when I looked at this verse, it was almost like I'd never seen it before, and I thought, oh my gosh, if I'm pretending that somehow I have arrived at sinless perfection, I'm lying. So whatever other problems I've got in my life, I'm now a liar. But see, when John wrote that, I mean, look at the truthfulness, the lack of thinking more highly of himself when he says this. Look, if we say we don't sin, we're lying. Don't pretend to be better than you are. James, and you know, James, most theologians look at James as a pretty hard book. I mean, James seems to have some things to say that are pretty cutting and pretty demanding. And yet right in the middle of his letter he says, "For we all stumble in many ways." There's certainly no illusion of perfectness there for James to make that statement. By the way, later on James says, "So then confess your faults to each other." In fact, we have a microphone. We'll just start right over here at this table. And you, okay, well maybe not. But see, one of the reasons why that thought is so terrifying to most Christians, especially in Western culture, is because we're not sure of how God really feels about us. We're not sure of how God sees our weaknesses. We're not sure about that. And because we're not sure, when we read something like where James says, "Confess your faults to each other," that's a terrifying thought. But again, these writers had no illusion of perfection. Let's see this again. Look at what, now I love this in Philippians because Paul is already in prison. And he's been sending out a variety of letters, and the things that he's been talking about have been cosmic in their dimensions. When you read the book of Philippians, starting with the very first chapter, I mean, he's talking about the transcendency of God and the supremacy of Christ and how Jesus humbled himself, but he's been exalted with a name above every name and all that. And then it's almost as if he gets halfway into the letter and he stops and he thinks to himself, now wait a minute, I don't want the believers who read this later on to think that somehow I am describing the kind of life whereby we can live perfect in this life. And so he says, not that I have already obtained it. Now, all of this that he's been writing about, he says, look, don't think that I've already obtained to what I'm writing. I'm writing way beyond where I am, or that I have already become perfect. And he boldly declares that he doesn't try to be more than he is. And then, of course, this is the verse that a lot of Christians know, but this is the context. He just got done saying, I'm in process. I'm not perfect. I'm in process. But I press on so that I may lay hold of that for which also I was laid hold of by Christ Jesus. Brethren, I do not regard myself as having laid hold of it yet. I've not fulfilled the will of God yet. I've not become all that I'm supposed to become. I haven't done that. But this is what I do, forgetting what lies behind and reaching forward to what lies ahead. Now these men were able to write about their own struggles, their own weaknesses, without feeling condemned about that. I mean, John, who says, if you say you don't sin, you lie, is the same one several sentences later who says, but you can learn to assure your heart before God so condemnation does not steal your confidence. But don't pretend that you're better than you are, because if you say you don't sin, you lie. I mean, it's the same guy who writes these same things. Now, somewhere in that, in seeing that, my heart cries out, I want to have the confidence that they had. Clearly, they did not pretend to be better than they were. And yet, they were able to live in a confidence. I want to suggest to you that the reason for their confidence was because they were absolutely certain of their eternal destination in God. They understood the reality of living in a fallen world, dealing with the fact that we are people who have our lives in two different kingdoms at the same time. We are in this world. We're not of it, but we're in this world. We're pilgrims here. We're citizens of a different kingdom. And yet here we are for some season of time struggling with the fact that we are in process. The one who justified us, past tense, is right now the one who is sanctifying us. Present perfect. We're being sanctified. We're in this process. But the reason that they could be in process, know and understand their weaknesses and their struggles, but that not steal their confidence, was because they had an absolute confidence in their eternal destination.